Kate.
Katie?
Well, it's Caitlin. I go by Katie
Kate.
for short.
Yeah. That's my husband. He's just snuck in for this one.
Hi.
This is Kate. Katie?
Yes.
Katie. This is also his daughter's name. So,
Aw.
yes. So Katie and I have been sat next to each other upstairs, which has been very nice because we're both quite introverted.
Yes. Sometimes sitting in front helps because I'm like, I don't have to see all the people.
Yeah. I also find I get really easily distracted.
Yes.
So like if I'm seeing everybody doing things,
Yeah.
I'm just,
Like I'm not going to be looking at my computer. I'll be looking at everybody else's in front of me.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to run to the restroom before this.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
I'm excited for it.
You go into the back stage. You're staying that far away.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Oh man. You're gonna do. Don't you do that at the wrong time. That would be mean. Oh my gosh. Everything's running over now. It's supposed to finish at 5. And I'm right under that. It is cold. I'll come.
Already?
I think so. It's working. The technology's working.
Good,
Not
good.
sure about my brain.
It's fine.
I guess are people probably gonna drift in late or?
Yeah, it ended later up there, I think. It was supposed to. So everybody's up there eating and drinking. So
I assume somebody up there will suddenly go, "It's time to go."
yeah,
All right.
that'll happen. Yeah.
Friend.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
I would have never.
Yes.
So this thing.
Yes. Real name. Informal name. So, hey Travis. Okay. Travis is my husband's name.
Oh, yeah.
Travis who
Nice.
is the researcher. Probably all the time.
Yeah. Neat.
And this is Max who works in my
Lucky I'm able to attend.
Got changed, didn't it?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
schedule got changed. Yeah. So I'm assuming you're this.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Are you moderating?
I don't know. Apparently a guy who was moderating this group is from Angela.
Oh. He's not very good with the mic, but.
I'll just, I'm sure they'll shout at you.
Oh, someone's keeping time, I guess.
Yeah, he's already threatened to do it at random times, so don't do it at random times. Please stick to the correct points. Sabotage me. Right. Prowl around the
So are you
you know.
attending
No.
much of this or just get crushed?
He is threatened also to tell everyone, I don't want to listen to this outfit, and I just need to.
We're matching.
Yeah.
Color.
But yeah, I could just add a tail. Trust.
You have like 10 minutes to talk after.
Yeah. I also got a report.
Okay. I thought I would, you can see me right here.
Did people get the impression there were many more people looking like they're on their way down, or should we go for it?
I say go
Go for it.
Go for it? Yeah, okay. All right, well, welcome today, and thank you so much for coming to this session called Red Light Realities and allowing the voice of those with lived experience to shape policy and practice. So my name is Catherine, and I hope in this session to give you a clear account of what the red light areas are like in India from the perspective of people who have been directly affected, who have first-hand experience. And whilst the primary focus of the research I've been doing has been on Nepali women who have experienced commercial sexual exploitation in India, I would like to say at this point, if you're from Bangladesh or an Indian-based NGO, this situation is quite similar, so hopefully there'll be something useful for you in this. But my aim is not to merely describe the reality of what's going on, but also to try and highlight ways in which this lived experience could and should be shaping how we do our practice and how the policies are being written. So just to start, who am I? I think this is literally the only photo that I have of myself which is remotely formal. But what really gives me the right to be standing here today and talking about Nepali women and Indian red light areas. Obviously, I'm from the UK. I'm not Nepali, I'm not Indian. I did grow up in Southeast Asia and I've spent the last 9 years in South Asia. I have some useful skills from my academic background and from my work experience, but what I would say is that none of this really matters. It does not matter who I am today. The only thing that really matters today is that I have lived alongside women who are working in red light areas in India, and I've taken the time to listen to them and hopefully taken the time to learn from them. And I actually hope that one day I won't need to be standing at the front here, that these women themselves, if they want to, will be stood up here talking for themselves to you. So whose voices are we listening to today? And I do want to clarify, this is their voices. I am a conduit between them and you today. So this is Nepali women who've experienced commercial sexual exploitation in India. And the voices have been captured over 52 different interviews over 3 different research projects. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about these projects, but I would like to say that from the voluntary repatriation, it's a really unique insight, a voice that's not heard often, because these interviews were done in the red light areas in India. So these are not voices of women who've been rescued and have come into shelter houses. These are women who are still in active situations of exploitation. And also the importance that we have of shifting our narratives away from the stories that we hear to actual methodical data collection, which is done ethically, and this data can be used to make informed changes to our practice. So there's the viability of voluntary repatriation, and this research was done in 3 cities in India, so Kolkata, Mumbai and Pune, and includes 9 different red light areas. So if you're used to India, this is Sonagachi and Kidapur in Kolkata, Budwapeth in Pune, and Mumbai, Torbay, Sonapur, Grant Road, Kamathipura, Mira Road, and Nalasapara East. Unfortunately, there isn't any data from Delhi in this, or from GB Road in Delhi, and that's mostly because this is the first destination that the children or young women are taken to, and it's incredibly difficult to access the brothels in these areas There's car mechanic shops that run by day and some very steep staircases that go up to the back behind these shops, and it's very difficult to access and speak to these women, and there's high levels of control. The second research project is one that's ongoing that I'm doing into the lived experience of raid and rescue. So I've been doing in-depth interviews with women who have since come back to Nepal, who have been experienced mostly the raid and rescue situation in Delhi. So we are getting some insight from Delhi, but usually this is retrospective because you will never be able to talk to a woman who is still in a brothel in Delhi. And then the third project is an awareness prevention research project. So the Anti-Trafficking Awareness Campaign, designed by survivors and implemented as a randomized controlled trial in rural Nepal. This is also a very new project, an international collaboration, and Travis, if you wave at the back, is actually heading this project up. And he is a development economist, and he's bringing a lot of quantitative research expertise into the anti-trafficking field, which I think is really important to do some large-scale studies that are going to generate really good data. So to date, we've run 2 focus groups with 10 survivors, and they're sharing their thoughts and ideas on how we should be developing awareness campaigns. Why are women so vulnerable to cross-border sex trafficking, and what would stop them going? And looking at things like what would be the best way of implementing this, and what sort of format would you present that in. So for example, we're hearing about current trends in trafficking. This is all on social media. Should your intervention also be a digital platform awareness campaign? So just to look at the demographics of the voices, the ages of the women who spoke in these projects range from 22 years old to 67 years old, so that's quite a big age range. The age they were trafficked was between 9 years old and 28 years old. There was one lady who was 44, and I've taken her out of the data here because she voluntarily went in for economic reasons, financial desperation, so she wasn't trafficked. So for the ones trafficked, the average age is about 17 years old. Over 50% of these women were under 18 when they first were trafficked from Nepal into India. They have been in India between 3 and 42 years, so that's a long time outside of their home country. And they're mostly from the 2 districts north of Kathmandu, so Nuwakot and Sindhupalchok. And they are also mostly all from one of the ethnic groups in Nepal, which is the Tamang group. So I am going to start just going over some of the red light realities. So looking at what are the different types of red light area in India, who are the customers, what is it like when women first arrive in India. Some of this will be known to you, some of it won't be known, so just a little bit of a trigger warning. If any time you feel upset listening to this, then please do feel free to leave. There's the Breakout Room 1, which is a safe space as well, so don't feel any difficulty about walking out the room, that's fine. So the different types of red light area, they can be city-based, rural-based, you can have multi-story buildings, you can have slum-based red light areas. The image on the screen now is looking out over Sonagachi in Kolkata, and this will be similar to Kamatipura in Mumbai and Budwapeth in Pune. So you have a high density of multi-story buildings, maybe 5 stories high, maybe 20 rooms per floor, and several women sharing a room in each of these rooms. And there'll be different types within these red light communities. So you'll have very high-end brothels in there, where you don't see the women come out very much, it's very controlled. You'll have mid-level control, and the women will actually come out quite frequently. They'll be having a cup of tea in the community, and you can chat to them quite easily. You'll have very specific brothels where it's only Nepali women working, or maybe only Bangladeshi women working. Some of the women will be renting a private room within a brothel once they've been there a bit longer, so they're not as controlled by a madam, but they're still in the building. And then you'll get women who they call flyers, who just come in for the day, rent a room for an hour, and then they'll do that per customer, and then they'll go home in the evening. So this is the different types of things that are happening in red light areas. There's also the slum-based, so these can be in the cities or in rural India. Very basic, poor quality housing, very temporary, sort of mud tracks and things like that. There's quite a few of these in Mumbai. There's also some in rural West Bengal, so on the river that goes between India and Bangladesh. And these rooms are literally plywood walls with a tin roof, so it gets super hot in the sun. Just one bed inside and a rubbish bin to throw used condoms in, and that's it. So it's not. Sometimes people think red light area, they might think of Amsterdam or something glitzy and lots of nice lights and stuff. This is quite different from that. So thinking about customers, it's mostly a local customer base, so mostly Indian men. Sex tourism is quite infrequent unless you are in a place like Goa, where there's more tourists coming in, or perhaps in the more hotel rooms, more high-end private sort of arrangements with escorts. And the customers come from quite a high range of socio-economic backgrounds. So when I first went to Kolkata, this is in Sonagachi, and this guy, I actually thought he was dead. I had to check. So he got very drunk in the bar inside of the red light area, came out and passed out. And that's some of the kind of guys that will be visiting the red light area. And there are some women who'll wait outside that bar for these guys to come out and try and get their business. There'll be men who visit after payday. There'll be rich young men who are just trying to get their first experience in a red light area. You'll get people coming in who are just secretly filming with inside the brothels and then putting it on YouTube just for their like social media clickbait. You'll get Nepali students coming in to see the Nepali women in the brothels there. So there's quite a range. So when these women first arrive in India, a lot of them talk about being really shocked. So they're coming from rural Nepal, mostly, so very, very poor, basic villages, not a lot going on. So they're shocked by the size of the buildings that they see, the number of men that are walking around the area, and they usually haven't even seen women wearing short dresses and makeup and things like that, so they feel quite overwhelmed. And this is a picture of a room in Kidapur red light area in Kolkata. And because the buildings are getting quite old, often inside the rooms, it's damp, it's not great. Okay, I'm giving you an impression, this is not classy. Some of it will be better than this, some is worse than this, but it gives you an idea of what it's like inside these rooms. And other women talk about being kept inside dark rooms for months on end, not being allowed out when they first arrive. They'll be sleeping in a room with several women. Sometimes there'll be nowhere to sleep, so they sleep on the roof space if they can find a space. So working in these areas, when they first arrive, they are often restrained and raped so that they get used to what is going to happen and before they go into general sex work. And they talk about working 24/7. So they'll start working at 8 a.m. in the morning and then have to right through until 3 a.m. Maybe they'll sleep if there's not many customers that day. So when I visited some friends in Pune, this is a picture of inside their room. They used to do sex work in Kolkata, but they've since relocated. And they took me into their brothel, to their room. And it was crowded with men. I go up to the top floor and there was just a single corridor, which had been partitioned off with these walls with the roses on. And the walls didn't even reach the ceiling. And there's about 20 rooms in this row, about 4 meters by 2 meters. The entire room is just a bed, and they can keep their personal things under the bed. And we were just sitting, having a cup of tea, talking about life, and there's a customer next door seeing somebody else just draping his clothes over the top. So it's not nice, okay? It's not what you think of when you think of maybe in Europe, or maybe even in Bangkok, I don't know. And these women will not be earning any money for several years. So the madam will keep all their money and they have to repay the trafficking debt. So they won't have any money for maybe 5 or 6 years. And they're controlled when they first arrive, both physically and psychologically. So these are some quotes from women. There were women and men who would stay by the front door, who would not allow us to leave. There was always someone watching us. If we got very sick, we would be escorted outside with someone, in front, behind, and to each side, and taken to see a doctor. And if they weren't behaving properly or didn't comply, the women talk about being beaten and things like that. And there's also psychological control. So they're taught to fear. They're told that the police will make them disappear if they try and report anything to the police. They're threatened with not seeing their family again if they don't do what they're told. And then there's some complicity here, and they're told that if, just by the fact that they agreed to travel from Nepal into India, maybe tricked for a job, or they fell in love or something like that, just because they said they would go, that they've consented to do sex work. So, and they believe these lies, so they think that actually they agreed, and so they feel quite ashamed to say that anything's happened. And it's on the basis of these initial experiences that can last up to about 6 years that current policy and practice has been based. So the general model that is being used now is the raid and rescue model. So basically the woman is under high control in a brothel in India when she first arrives. So the only option really is with the police and NGO partners to go into the brothel, find the girl, the young woman, rescue her, take her out and put her into a sort of sheltered house where she can access services like healthcare, education, things that will help her restore herself and then be prepared to reintegrate back into society. And it is important and it is valid, but there are huge problems with it. And if you're from a rescue-based NGO, you will know this. It is increasingly hard to do a successful raid and rescue in India. But why? Why is that? So I'm going to share some insights from the women now from the Raid and Rescue Project. Police are actually taking bribes from the madams to tell them when the raid is going to happen. And then another thing, the madam pays the police to release the girl from jail and then deducts the cost from the girl's earnings. So the women talk about, so if the police will come in, they'll take a girl, they'll actually put her in jail sometimes, and if the madam pays about 50,000 Indian rupees, she can get her out on the same day. So there's a lot of corruption arrangements and bribery between the brothels and the police. So another reason is concealment. You saw in the quote just before, if the madam knows the raid is going to happen, they hide the younger girls, they hide the young women within secret spaces in the brothel. They would shout that the police were coming, and we would go and open the almirah and remove all the clothes, and there would be a door behind it, and there was a space like a cave. It was dirty. They would break a wall and put a hidden door and put the girls in. They rebuild the wall and paint over it. Sometimes they stick posters over it. So there's fake rooms, there's small rooms where they hide. People talk about there being rooms above the counters where the customers are giving the money, and there's a fake room above there where they hide the girls. And there's maybe 20 or 30 people put into these small spaces. They can't breathe properly, they're passing out. And they talk also, if they know that there's a big raid coming, they will actually move the girls and the young women to other buildings nearby, or to other cities in India, to other states in India. And if a very young child arrives, they're often hidden in a very secret location because they're too young to go into the brothel initially, and they're groomed there. Some of the girls talk about being dressed up and put makeup on and photographed, and then their photographs would be circled to the brothels and they would be sold to the highest bidder. So another thing that's going on is conditioning. They're trained on what to say and do when a raid happens, what to wear so that they look older. As soon as they know the police are coming, they make us wear saris and high heels, so our height appears taller. Because our bodies were small, they even gave us medicine to make us gain weight. So this medicine, when talking with the women, they say, it made me really hungry and I got fat. Now, they don't obviously know what it is, but reading between the lines, I would say that these women are regularly being given steroids to make them appear bigger than they are, because they will gain weight, and so they look older. And if you're working with women coming out of red light areas who talk about being given medication to make them look bigger, check their bone density, because this actually has an impact on mineral absorption and things like that. So they could actually be high risk for things like osteoporosis. And you see in this quote, Madam trains us to say that we're there by choice and that no one forced us. So another reason is control, and we heard earlier about how people guard them or escort them outside, but there's also things like CCTV. There's CCTV cameras at the center of the clocks. One madam used to tell us, don't do anything because we can see it all. They're financially controlled, they don't have any money, so even if they could get out, they can't afford to get back. They don't have a telephone, a phone, mobile phone, and they talk about controlled by not knowing language. So when they first arrive, they can't speak Hindi or maybe the local state language in India. So they can't even communicate what's happening if they had an opportunity. And I think in the panel just before, there was some talk about fraud. So a lot of women are given fake Indian ID. They make you ADA cards to show the police. They increase our age on it and they have a different mother's and father's name. Even your name is different. They make us take bone tests to determine our age. I was 17, but they bribed people and told them to put 22. So during a raid, they will need definitive proof that a girl is underage. And so they do sort of bone x-ray tests, and it will give an indication of her age. So even the medical facilities are also corrupt and concealing correct information. So there's one final reason why raid and rescue is so difficult, and that is because it is resisted by the women and the young women and the girls. And that tends to surprise people the most, because why would somebody want to resist being rescued from this situation that we've been hearing about? And there are things like police mistreatment. They're horrible, these police. They rescue the underage girls, take them to their office, and then abuse them. Once in a building, a police officer said to me, "You look so young, you're like a baby." And then he paid to do it with me. They talk about being beaten and dragged by the police so that their skin is scraped off if they're resisting. Some say that they have been stripped naked and beaten if they resist rescue. They're also quite fearful of NGOs working in India. They're taught to mistrust the NGOs. They think that these people will take us and sell us elsewhere. And there's multiple stories of women saying that they think if a woman goes into an NGO housing, they'll disappear, or they'll be returned to their village at some point dead. So this is what they're thinking is going on. And they may have had a bad experience of sheltered housing, or know somebody else who's had a bad experience. They wouldn't let us do anything freely. There were CCTV cameras everywhere, staff in every room. Wherever we went, whatever we did, there were rules for everything. Now, you think we need to be careful that shelter housing is good, but we also need to recognize that these girls and women are coming from highly controlled situations. So anything that reminds them of that level of control is going to be triggering. So even if you're doing a great job, they're not going to want to stay there. So we saw before about they have CCTV cameras in the brothel rooms. They had CCTV cameras in the shelter house. The association is not going to be good. Staff in every room when they've come from a situation where people are escorting them outside and watching their every move. So we need to be very careful about that. So having heard some of these experiences of raid and rescue, are there ways that we could be listening to their voices and improving the practice of raid and rescue? Now the research is ongoing, so I hope a little later to have more detailed suggestions, but there's some initial thoughts here. So tackling corruption, we can see there's a breakdown between the relationship with the police and the madam. So these women, can we be collecting evidence from the women with their consent as to who is doing this? How is this happening? Can we be training the police on how to conduct a raid with using less violence? Because these things are stopping women being rescued or even wanting to be rescued. Can we be mapping inside the brothels? So these women know where all the secret hiding spaces are. They can remember which brothel they were in Delhi. if we knew where the secret rooms were, if we knew where the buildings were outside or where they are going, you could do targeted raids. This could improve the practice. If NGO staff are going into a raid, I think they should be specifically speaking to the people they're looking to rescue and saying, hey, we understand that you are scared of the sheltered housing. Let us just dispel this rumor. Address the things that they fear directly when you're going in. And obviously improve the housing that they're going into to make sure that it isn't triggering to them. We can also be looking at tackling fraud. So which are the medical centers that are falsifying the bone density test results? Who is making the fake Indian Aadhaar cards? If you can start finding out who the allied fraud and corruption, who is doing that, then maybe you can start tackling the bigger problem as well. So there's one more reason why raid and rescue is being resisted, and I think this is probably the most important thing that I will say today, and that is because the children and the young women grew up. That is why, a huge reason why they are resisting. So if you look at the data from the voluntary repatriation, these women that I spoke with, between 22 years old and 67 years old, they've been over 40 years in India, some of these women. And the reality is the majority of the women in red light areas in India are adults. They might have arrived as children or very young women. Almost all of them were trafficked, but they weren't rescued. And they've now been in India a very long time. They've become resilient. They've learned to adapt to their situation. And not just adapt, it's more than this. They've created a life there. They might have a partner. They might have a child. Some of the women spoke about employing a maths tutor to come into the brothel room and teach them maths. They have a life there. And they don't actually want to be rescued anymore. Some more quotes from women in the red light area. Raid is very good for people who are suffocating there, who have been brought there by force, underage, who've been trapped, bought and sold, because everyone is trying to do good for them. They're trying to do good. But in other cases, some live there with their own will. Now this woman, a 27-year-old woman, I know her personally. She's a classic trafficking victim, 9 years old, sold by a family member. And she went into Delhi and she experienced the horror of what it was like in Delhi. She probably dreamed of rescue for about 5 years, but it didn't happen. And now she's in her 20s. She doesn't want to be rescued anymore. And she planned her return to Nepal for several years. And when she was ready and felt it was the right time for her, she came back. Another quote. I feel people who need money, they need the money. What can you do? So regardless of whether the person was trafficked or went by choice, or as we heard about earlier, soft trafficking, they knew it might have been sex work, but economic drivers, they went anyway, and then got trafficked and trapped. They still need the money to live, and poverty is a major vulnerability in sex trafficking. They live in poor rural villages in Nepal. They have limited access to education. They have limited job opportunities, and this leads people to taking risky job options, or perhaps for a family member to sell a daughter into sex work. And if there isn't a viable economic alternative for women wanting to stop sex work, how can they leave? Especially if she has become the main financial provider for her family. Just looking at the reality of finance in red light area, sorry that's not as big as it could be. So this is looking at the income that the women are making through sex work in India by age. So if you'll see in the first 3 to 6 years, nothing. Then they're not getting any money because they're repaying their trafficking debt. And then in their 20s, this is a generalization, they're starting to keep some of their money. They're told that they will keep 50%, which can I don't know if they actually get 50% because they say now, I don't know what 50% was, so I'm not sure. But they can be getting 20 to 40,000 Nepali rupees. I did the conversion just to make everything standardized as Nepali rupees. They get that a month. And then you see in their 30s, they become more independent from the madam, so they're keeping more of their money, their trafficking debt has been repaid. They can be earning 100,000 or a lakh or more every month. Then you get them older, and this is a problem area, 40s and 50s, they're finding it much, much harder to get customers, so their earning drops down significantly to about 10,000 a month. And then we have the horrible situation here, where either they will continue to be low earners, or you have women who are in their 50s and 60s now who are earning really high earnings again because their only option that they know of is to become a madam. And so they're now running a brothel and they're making money off of other women. And so their earning goes right back up again. Now all of these women are going to need help to come out of the red light areas if they want to. And in those early years, rescue is entirely appropriate. They're not going to get out any other way. So that's why we need to improve it. And then after this, there'll be windows of opportunity. And there may be resistance. Ladies in their 20s, they've just started keeping some money. They might not want to go. Ladies in their 30s, they're earning a lot of money. It's going to be difficult to find a viable, sort of comparable economic opportunity. The women in their 40s and 50s, they need a lot of help. Don't have a lot of money, but they've also lost a lot of confidence. So for them to make a decision to come out, they're going to need a lot of support from NGOs in India to build their confidence back up to a point where they think it's possible. And then in the 60s, we really need to try and intervene in this if the women want before they become a madam. And then we end up with this complexity of you're working with individuals who are both a victim and a perpetrator. And when I speak to people, would you be willing to work with a madam? And they're like, oh, I haven't thought about that. Well, we actually need to think about that because there's a lot of women who, out of economic necessity and lack of alternatives, lack of knowing about anything else, who are becoming madams. But these women were still trafficked when they were 12 years old. They still have the experiences of a victim and they also have the experiences of a perpetrator. So this is a far more complex situation than we're prepared to look at the moment, I think, but we need to. So even though it's difficult, they want to come home. 84% of the women said that they want to come back to Nepal. They love Nepal, but they usually say later, when I've earned enough money, when I have paid for my child's education, when I've repaid my debts. But they don't know how. They don't know how to come back. And the longer the time is that they are in India, the more disconnected they will become from Nepal. And they've seen the children be rescued, but they never were. They actually think nobody cares for them because they are older. I've had a woman in her 30s say to me, nobody cares about me, I'm 30. And I'm like, I'm 15 years older than you, plus. Come on, life isn't over. They're giving up hope of anything different. I am old now and I am tired. This is a 50-year-old woman who was trafficked age 9. She's been in India for 49 years. She's tired and she's had enough and she doesn't know how to get out. I don't feel like saying anything. I feel everything is finished. I feel my life is over. This is a 33-year-old woman who feels that there is nothing else for her beyond the red light area. And then another quote, I feel like I am stuck somewhere. I can't either move forwards or backwards. She's 22. She can't see a way out. And you might assume that a 22-year-old would fit within the raid and rescue model, but she's already been there for 10 years. She's not your typical 22-year-old. And we really have to make changes so that these adult women do not feel as though they are stuck and that their life is over. It isn't acceptable, and we really need to rethink and redesign. And we heard earlier today, things evolve. The reality in these red light areas is evolving. So our practice and our policies have to evolve. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a generation stuck in red light areas in India. So looking at this, I've said how we can improve potentially on the raid and rescue, how we could make that a more effective practice. But I think we also need to be developing non-rescue pathways out of exploitation. So for the ones who are resisting being rescued because of financial necessity, and also for the ones who want to be autonomous, the ones who want to exercise choice. And some people ask me, is this even possible? Because we talk about the high levels of control in the brothels when they first arrive. And it is. So the majority of these adult women will say they're already traveling back and forth between Nepal and India to visit family for big festivals. They're saying that nobody is controlling them anymore, that they are free to make this choice and move. They just don't know what their options are and what's possible outside of a red light area. So in shaping practice, we also need to look at the sheltered housing side of this. We've heard before that people are a bit fearful of sheltered housing, and there's, I think, potential issues this, particularly if you're working with adults. And that falls into two categories, mostly of accessibility and suitability. So accessibility. If a person hasn't been rescued, how are they supposed to access the sheltered housing? So normally the NGO would say, I've rescued this person, I'm going to put her in this house. If she just comes out voluntarily, where does she go? How does she access that house? And Nepal, I don't think, has actually published any victim identification guidelines yet. If they do, when they do, these need to be more sophisticated so that we can actually identify who's been affected, not just by the sake that they've been rescued. But there's ways of them to say, I have been affected by this. I also should be able to access the things that can help me to reintegrate back into society. And we could be looking at things like different referral systems where women can refer themselves, or perhaps peer referral, which is what I'm seeing. So women know other women and they're saying, my friend wants to come back now, and that would be acceptable. Then looking at age for accessibility, and part of the voluntary repatriation research was also talking to people in Nepal who are trying to work in the area, what services they provide and who can access them. And one of the things that came up, if you look at this, is who can access services by age. So a 20-year-old can access 100% of the services that were available. By the time she's 50 or 60 years old, that's dropped to about 60%. And this is particularly significant with housing. So I think 75% of the housing providers have an upper age limit for who can come in, maybe mid-20s maximum. So where does the older woman go if she doesn't have family in Nepal, or maybe she doesn't want to be with family, she has no other options? Where does she go? She's not welcome in the houses that are designed for people who've experienced sex trafficking. So we need to broaden our view of who's affected. Then there's suitability, so the design of these houses. So these women are not generally alone, they're 30 or 40, 50 years old. They often have children. 58% of the women I spoke to have children. Can they bring their child into a sheltered house? Maybe if it's a young child, maybe if it's a female child, but we've been talking about the men. What if she has a teenage boy? He can't come. And what about these children who are born in red light areas, particularly the men? So we have a 20-year-old young man whose mother was in the red light area. He's come back to Nepal and he's found nobody wants to help him. He can't get his citizenship card sorted out. He needs help. He's had vicarious trauma. He's had his own direct trauma. But nobody's thinking about him because he's a he. And then looking at the services, so the priorities of if you're thinking the person coming into the house is going to be a child or a young woman, the way you design and prioritize services is going to be probably inappropriate for an adult woman. So an example of this is education. that'd be great. If you're a child, you can go back into formal schooling. That's a brilliant thing to do. An adult woman, not so good, because they have a lot of people dependent on them financially. They talk about when they come back, they want a job, they need to earn money. So they're not going to want to fit into the priorities of a housing model. So what could it look like? Now this is my little idea. So it's a voluntary exit model, and it's based on the research, and it doesn't replace raid and rescue. It should designed to operate alongside, sort of a dual pathway out of commercial sexual exploitations. The key difference is, obviously here, it's voluntary and not rescue. And if this is going to work, this needs a lot of collaboration with Indian-based NGOs, particularly in the sense of building confidence with the women. They may have stopped believing that anything else is possible. And also building awareness and connection to their, if it's the country of origin, whether that's Nepal, Bangladesh, or another part of India, but you need to build connection. If they don't know what's possible and what's available, where they came from, they're not going to go back. Would you? If you were going to migrate to a different country, would you leave without knowing what it was going to be like, or what you could do, or what jobs there were? You wouldn't do it. So why would these women be any different? And also building capacity. So a lot of women, maybe they can't read or write, and they say, I would love to learn to write my name before I come out. So then I can hold my head high. I can open a bank account when I come back and sign my name rather than doing a thumbprint. So build the confidence levels before they're coming out. It will help them with their decision making. So housing has now, in this model, become one of the services that a woman can access, rather than being the central point. And the woman herself is in the middle. So it's an I'd say woman-centric, but if there's men affected as well, it's just a person-centric approach to exiting. And then she can access the services around her according to her unique needs and her preferences. And then generally, to make this possible, you're going to need the sort of caseworker role to provide continuity of care. If they can start working with this individual when they're still in the place of exploitation, and then be a constant presence as they come back to wherever it is they want to relocate to, that would be good. And this person is not linked to any one service. So if she has a key person who's in a house or in a job, and then she moves and does a different job or finds her own house, her person that she trusts and finds support from doesn't end. So it's continuous. And this person should also help coordinate the different services and promote collaboration, because not one organization is going to be able to meet the needs of everybody, and it's not even going to really meet the needs of one person. So collaboration is really important. And I'm in the basis of registering an organization on that model, but it's just taking a really, really long time, which is very frustrating, but we'll get there. So just looking at service-specific adaptations. Are we doing okay for time? I think, yeah? Just check. Okay. So education. So we've got to understand the reality here. So the education baseline is low. 79% of these women had zero schooling before they went to India. Okay, so their literacy levels are low, and that affects everything else that we do. I would like to say, if you're working with Indian ladies, their education baseline is quite a bit higher. So I think the rural education in India is doing really well. So that would be a difference if you're working in India. But if you're working with Nepal, they have not been to school. And they don't really want to go back to school. They think they're too old, they don't have the confidence, but they do need to start improving their literacy and their numeracy. And you should start doing this in India. If you're working with Nepali women or Bangladeshi women, try and find resources or start partnering with people from those countries so that you can deliver this in their native language. Because if they do return to this country, it's going to be helpful for them to have developed the skills that will be useful when they go back. Skills training, this was a great one. So there's a lot of people doing really great skills training, and then the women come in to receive the training, and they get given a workbook and told to take notes and read from the board. And I was like, they can't read and write, and they feel really overwhelmed by this notebook. So try and do audio-visual for this demographic. And then considering that with their revision as well, because they're not going to be able to take notes and revise for any tests. So just go audio-visual, develop apps and things like that to help them. And looking at employment criteria, be realistic. We have really good options for trauma-informed workplaces in Nepal, but sometimes the entry levels are too high. So they're looking for Class 8 education, literacy, even the ability to speak English. And I was like, this is not going to happen. So if you're looking to do employment specifically for survivors of sex trafficking, India and Nepal, redesign your employment to make it actually possible for people to get a job with you. Put an interpreter, put a translator as a middle person between, if it's a language thing that's in place. But don't create job opportunity that's unachievable. Looking at employment is a top priority. So 74% of the women want to work in the city when they come back. 100% of the younger ones, and less so as they get older. And they're going to need this pretty quickly when they come back. But develop some more part-time options. So some of these women have children, do childcare. If you're not going to do part-time, provide childcare for them. Consider the age. If she's nearing retirement, she's tired. She doesn't want a full-time job, but she still needs to earn some money. And they'll also need to do things like accessing healthcare and legal, so they need some more flexibility. So job types. It's not just about, like we heard earlier, it's not just about the beauty industry or sewing. Like, try and develop some other alternatives, like barista training and working in restaurants. Ask the women what they're interested in and make sure there's opportunities available. I noticed in COVID in India, we were just explaining to the women about how a virus is spread and what the importance was of wearing a mask and washing hands and things like that. Straight away got it, and they became the biggest health advocates in the red light area. These women are entirely capable of doing things, so just approach them with respect. And look for their natural abilities. So these women often speak 4 or 5 languages. Can we develop opportunities which are strength-based development? They're really good with language. They already use social media. They can do video editing. Their jobs like that. Naturally, they've been raising children. They have been doing cooking. Are there allied jobs within bigger organizations that they could come really easily into and do those jobs? And don't forget about retirement. I'm not seeing that there's really any great options for women who are about to retire that where are they going to go? A woman who's 60 years old, who's reached retirement age and wants to come back, she's not going to get a job. Where does she go? How does she create a community when she goes back? Because she may have lost complete contact with her home village and her family, so she'll have nobody. So what about retirement? You can get finance. So most of the women will have debt. 58% had debt, and this will get higher as the older they get. It's between about 12,000 rupees and up to 5 lakhs, so 500,000 rupees. It's always taken from unregulated, unsafe lenders, high interest repayments, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And most of them are supporting family. Obviously, as they get older, this will decrease because they're losing family members. But as a woman gets older, her own health needs increase. So she's taking loans for that, and she is trying to pay for her medicine and healthcare costs, or they're paying for their child's education costs. So financial literacy, money management training, basic maths and numeracy is really important. And if you start this in India, these women, if they could understand how to manage their money, if they could understand, don't take that loan, start saving, do this, consolidate your debts, they could actually, with their level of earnings, repay their own debts and free themselves out of debt bondage and get themselves out. But they need to know the money management skills before that can happen. And if you're employing them, help them access things like health insurance and child sponsorship schemes and things like that, and make sure they understand that this offsets the income. So you've seen they can be earning a lot of money in India. They're not going to take a massive pay cut, But if they understood that health insurance and child sponsorship was available, then they might be willing to take the pay cut. Looking at health, now it is not just about sexually transmitted infection. That's actually, there's a lot of awareness there. So in India, that is reducing. It's not present. But be careful of the undiagnosed and untreated diseases. I've seen women wasting away from TB, from untreated thyroid disorders. A young woman in her 20s died from high blood pressure. Another woman in her 20s lost an eye because it was an untreated infection. So again, if you're in India, healthcare, try and help these women get access to healthcare whilst they're there. Recognize that the women who are getting older have more complex healthcare needs and they can't afford their medication. So if you can be running health camps, that would be great. And check their eyesight. So many women say, I can't leave the red light area because I can't do another job because I can't see. I was like, you might just need reading glasses. Okay, so some of the basic things that we would check, they're not checking. Mental health, majority said that they had some emotional health issues, and this mostly was around stress and feelings of sadness. Now I would say when you're looking at counselling, the timing of this has to be really sensitively done. Don't do it in India when they're still in the red light area. Still ongoing trauma, and they need their coping mechanisms in place to deal with this. But I would also say don't do it very quickly after they come out, because they need to have community and friends and stability before anything like that can happen, and they might not ever want to do it. And I think if anybody's involved in trauma counselling, trauma-informed care, I think this really needs to be designed culturally. Because cultures like in Nepal, it's a community-based culture, it's not individualistic. So some of the counselling techniques and ways that we approach things don't really fit in a community-based culture. So I think that would be a really good research project for somebody. Look into that. And I would say emotional management is probably the top priority. Help people learn how to manage without necessarily knowing where it's coming from, how to handle stress, how to de-escalate from feelings of anger, teach them grounding techniques, help develop healthy coping mechanisms, give them the tools that they need to manage complex emotions without asking them to dig into why they're having it, because that is going to take years and years and years probably before they even want to look at it. We've spoken a lot about housing, so just a few other things. Is getting the balance between safety and choice right. So you could be doing an excellent job, but people are going to react to control, even if you've done it in the name of safety, because it's going to remind them of their early brothel experiences. So it's harder, much, much harder to manage if you're giving people a lot more freedom and saying, yep, you have the right to choose. It can go wrong, but it's a right of people to choose and make their own decisions, and people have the right to make mistakes and they have the right to make a bad decision, and we need to allow this and we need to stop controlling it. This is a normal part of being an adult, is making mistakes. So complex trauma, this one I think it was interesting when I was talking to people in Nepal, and 100% of the housing providers said, yeah, we'll take a woman who has experienced commercial sexual exploitation. But then it starts dropping down. 87% said, yeah, we'll take somebody with complex trauma. But then when you go lower into it, so many are saying no, but not if she's got addiction issues, not if there's an eating disorder, not if there's self-harming, not if there's a mental health condition requiring medication. And these are common with complex trauma, and complex trauma is going to be common with a woman who's been in a red light area for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So we need to start upskilling ourselves in the housing or collaborating more strongly with others to make it possible for women coming out of complex situations. I'm currently working with an organization in India for a woman who's in her late 30s and wants to come back to Nepal. And the best place for her that they've been able to get is in a children's home, because it's in a sort of more rural location, and she doesn't like confined spaces. And she gets really bad night terrors. So several times during the night she'll wake up and she can be a bit aggressive. And they've tried, like, she wants to come home to Nepal and nobody will take her because she has night terrors and it's complicated. So at the moment we're trying to organize, well, it should start next week, some video counseling with a Nepali speaking counselor, because she's also not being able to communicate in her language with people who have the skills to help her. In that case, we're going to see, like, what is really going on here, what level of care, is it safe for her to come back now, what does that look like? But we really should never be saying no to somebody who wants to come out. Nobody should be denied the opportunity to come home just because they are complicated. And we should also look at alternative housing support. So they may just need help to find a room or to help rent a room until they get a job and can earn the money for themselves. So it's looking at legal things here. So prosecution, we heard from somebody with the Trafficking in Persons report. So one of the key markers of how well a country's doing is prosecution. How many convictions are you doing? Things like that. So one thing to notice here is that whilst 72% of the women could identify that they had been trafficked, that something had happened to them, 6% want to actually report the crime. They don't want to pursue justice. They don't want to prosecute their trafficker. And there's a real disparity here between what society is saying, this is a marker of good anti-trafficking work, and what the women themselves want to do. And we can't force them. And there could be ways, other ways in which women could help in saying, these are the traffickers. They know who they are. So could they be providing information in another way to break down the systems without looking for personal justice, but for the well-being of the whole group? I've just had a 5-minute warning. I'm talking longer, sorry. So I will skip. So they don't see legal stuff as particularly difficult, but it is. So that if they don't have their Nepali citizenship, it's going to be really hard for them to get it when they get back. They have fake Indian ID, which can get them in trouble on the border. And if they've had a child born in India, that child is going to have significant problems trying to get Nepali citizenship when they come back. So we should be refining the legal systems and streamlining citizenship issues for people who've experienced trafficking. And this is more so for women from Bangladesh. They are trafficked into India with illegally, so they become illegal immigrants the second they're trafficked. So they won't even admit that they're from Bangladesh when you talk to them. And then they're being exploited by the police because of this. They get arrested and put in jail. And they said, show us your Indian birth certificate, not even an Aadhaar card, because everybody knows you can fake that. If they can't produce that, they're being asked to pay about 50,000 rupees to be let out of jail. So if you're doing immigration law, you really need to be looking at the situation for women who are trafficked into a country, become illegal immigrants, and how that works for them to also get out of this situation without being prosecuted for that. So this is the last one. No, it's not. Oh, I've got to go fast, haven't I? Okay, so skills. We looked at education. Make sure you're designing skills training according to the education level. Work skills. Make sure you're matching what work skills you're doing to actual viable job opportunities when they come out. Don't teach them something where they can't get a job. There's great jobs in Nepal for sort of image editing and that kind of thing, but nobody knows how to use a computer. So teach those skills so that you can actually get a job when you come out. Again, prioritize money management and also try and slow down decision making. So decision making skills. Try and stop the impulsive decision making that happens. And this one, so don't forget about having fun. It's often overlooked. And I just want to share this image. She's not been trafficked, but she does run a shop in Sonagachi. I really wish I could share with you some pictures of women having fun. But obviously for identity protection, I can't do that. But I do want to say, look at the smile on her face. This is in a red light area. And this is entirely possible. And people need respite from their problems and difficulties. You do not need to wait until they come out of a red light area for them to have fun. So we used to organize things like picnics, and we'd play stupid games, and people would laugh, and it would be normal. And you can see the woman, aside from her being a victim, she can start seeing herself as not being a victim. They're mothers, they're really good at knitting, they have a great sense of humor, they're wise, they're compassionate, they are some of the strongest, funniest, smartest women I've ever met. And yes, they have been victims of sex trafficking, they have been exploited, but this is not who they are. This is one thing that has happened to them, a significant thing, but that is not who they are. We used to get people coming into the red light areas from outside, foreigners coming in, like, show us what's happening in the red light area. And I stopped it and just said to the women, would you be happy to, there's this woman who'd quite like to come and have a cup of tea with you. Would you be happy to invite her to your brothel room for a cup of tea? And then just talk to the people and say, you will see these things as you're going through, but you're having a cup of tea with this woman. This is her name. She has 2 kids. Just see her as the human being that she is. So family connection is really important for these women. 86% see it as important to essential when they come back. So if they go into a sheltered house and they're denied the opportunity to go back and see their family in the village, it's not going to work. This is one of the most important things for them. And whilst they do fear stigma and rejection, it is not stopping them from wanting to reconnect in this way. And actually, it's one of the benefits of coming out voluntarily is that they can maintain their own cover story. They're not being pulled out of the situation and put into a house that is directly associated with sex trafficking. So they can keep their own story and how they tell people what's gone on. And community is incredibly important. So they need friendships. They need opportunities in India to create friendships. They need these opportunities when they come back to Nepal. Hold socials for people. We do this with the women back in Kathmandu. And they will gravitate to other women who've come from the same city. They'll even gravitate to each other who've come from the same brothel within the red light area. They need peer support. One of the focus groups that we ran recently, one woman became very tearful because she said, it's the first time I've been able to speak openly to somebody about India, what happened. And she said she felt a lot lighter from that. So having the community with each other is really important. So just this last one as a summary. So I would suggest from the research and lived experience, we should have 2 approaches to exits from commercial sexual exploitation in India. One should be the raid and rescue, but with modifications according to what's actually happening with the practice. And the other would be a voluntary exit and return, which is entirely based on lived experience. And policy needs to reflect this, and this is mostly going to affect funding, but it just means diverting funding away from, well, splitting it, so it can go to the housing in that model already, but it should follow the woman, not the services. So wherever she decides to go, wherever she lives, what she thinks is important, the funding should follow her. And we need to adapt the services according to who these people really are, who she is, what does she like, what does she need, what's important. And this way we could design a system that is based on lived experience, that doesn't leave anybody behind. A system where women do not remain in red light areas for 10, 20, 30 or 40 years. When a 58-year-old woman doesn't feel old and tired, having lived in a red light area since she was 9 years old. A system where a 33-year-old woman doesn't say, my life is over. A system where a 22-year-old woman doesn't feel stuck and can't see a way forwards. And I would say for their sake, we must do better. Thank you. Thank you so much. I believe there is time for questions. Yeah, hi. I'll do my best.
Okay, I don't have a question. questions. I have asked more things regarding your presentation.
Yeah.
Because I'm a lawyer, I'm from Nepal and belong to the Taman community. I'm working in that place, as you mentioned, all the places in Kolkata and Mumbai and Delhi and in Agra and also in the Meerut in Delhi. So I'm direct involving in the rescue process and access to justice process. So I want to add more things, if you have a time.
Yeah, I mean, we have somebody here who is working in the legal profession in Nepal who has experience of all these things who would like to add. How much time do we have? 5. Is there anybody who has a pressing question? Or I can give the last 5 minutes to my friend here. Is there anything? Or you can always, yeah?
I just want to know, is there any existing cross-border collaboration between Nepal and India?
That is the main thing.
Sorry?
So we are doing a lot of cross-border meeting also in the Indo-Nepal border area.
Yeah.
So recently we are organizing one more cross-border meeting. It's maybe in the September. So I'm from
that's great.
Nepal. Yeah, I'm from
Yeah.
Nepal.
So it's in development, so it hasn't existed. There's a bilateral agreement between Bangladesh and India, but this one is in development. So that hopefully will help. I've been into the Ministry of Women and Children saying, hey, do a dual pathway. So we'll see.
I'm also the member of the NCCSD. It's a National Committee on Combat Human Trafficking. It belongs to the Ministry of Nepal. That's why I know so many things. As you mentioned, it's a little bit I'm agree and I'm disagree.
Yeah, it's
so
difficult.
that's why.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in the
Yeah.
pipeline in Nepal
Yeah.
with the government and policies and things like that. So hopefully it will come back in. Yeah. Was there anything else? You can get me through the app. That's my email address if you want it. I'm around for the conference. I think we've probably run out of time, but that's great that you're here. Let's have a chat. Okay? All right. Go and relax for 5 minutes and get ready for the next session. Thank you for coming.
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
Thomas is here in the green shirt. Yeah, it's just
I've seen in the Philippines, but just
we're very early stages.
there's a, I know one sentence, there's a lady in town, art display somehow related to trafficking. So, it's good. I'm telling you. There's apparently it's like America. Louisiana. The South. Oh, nice. Yeah, I lied. One time last year for Day Against International Day Against Trafficking in Persons, I went with them to the scribe. So that's the only time that I've been. I appreciated your insights to what you added to the there's always so much It's Gillian. Yeah, that Gillian. Oh, you've had that a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
specific rollout set times. It's kind of really good. Most impossible registered. Nepal is what about Cambodia?
From the US. Have you met anyone else from Unseen Reality? Yeah.
You are right. You're being recorded, Gillian.
Whereas India is still
I thought the recording was maybe done. I'll move out of the way then.
Yeah, I think a bunch of people do.
We are trying to the artist amendment is going to be a parliament right now in Nepal.
So it's going before it.
But I think it's long. I anti-trafficking act is going to be the amendment in the parliament right now. So just few days ago I'm logging.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm asking now. I have a lot of time to add more.
share it. Protect people with absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of things. Yeah. I agree.
And I'd love to hear more about what they're doing.
Yeah. I think that's